There was nothing like the classic sleepover birthday party when we were kids. Everyone getting together, playing games, staying up late, you name it. The party landed on a beautiful day. There were 10 of us kids in total, and when we arrived, we all started playing basketball. Since we were planning on playing PlayStation 2 all night, we decided to play outside and play basketball during the day since it wasn't raining or anything. We had a one-on-one tournament and played for quite some time. I don't know if kids still do this, but where we grew up, we pulled the hoop to the front of the house. We would have to get out of the road every time a car drove by, which wasn't that much. And while we were playing, we noticed this beat-up gray car drive by several times. Ordinarily, we wouldn't notice something like that, but because of the condition of the car and how many times he drove by, it was obvious. He didn't drive by us every minute either. It was every few minutes, so he wasn't just driving around the block before he would return and drive by again. And by the fourth or fifth time of him driving by, we were starting to get annoyed. Finally, the last time he drove by, he stopped at the end of the street. We all looked for a moment, but we started playing again a few seconds later. And then he started to reverse, and that's when we all got a little weirded out. He reversed until he was right underneath our basket, and he rolled down his window. He was some gross-looking guy. I just remember him having this nasty skin with a bad comb-over haircut, and in this really squeaky voice, he just says,
"Hey fellas, you guys pretty good at basketball? I was actually on my way to the park to shoot some hoops, but I don't have a basketball. How about I borrow yours? You know, some of you guys can even come with me if you'd like. What do you say?"
Now I know this was bad news, and I didn't want anything to do with it. I looked at my friend and said that we needed to go inside now, and I implied that his mom wasn't going to be happy about us talking with a stranger. Most of us were quick to say no, realizing that this was a situation that we'd seen a million times talked about in school. A couple of friends were so naive that they didn't realize that this could potentially be a dangerous situation. I had to grab one of my buddies who was basically about to get into the passenger seat with the guy in one of our spare balls. We all started walking inside, even though the guy was still talking to us. The one thing I heard him say, and I remember it specifically freaking me out, was when he said,
"Oh, come on, guys. I won't even tell your parents. You won't get in trouble."
Even at that young age, I knew what this was, and I freaked out. We shut the front door, and I looked out the window. I saw the neighbor from across the street walk outside and started approaching the car, but he drove off before the guy could reach the car. My friends were mostly unfazed by this weird interaction, but I had the worst pit in my stomach about the entire thing. Close to dusk, my friends wanted to play hide and seek outside. I voted against the idea just because I didn't know if that sketchy guy was still lurking around, but I was outvoted. We played for a bit, and I eventually forgot about that dude. And when I was hiding, I was trying to find a spot where nobody could find me. I thought that I achieved that, but I was about to find out how wrong I was. Behind my buddy's fence was a narrow walkway between the back of his fence and the fence of the neighbor who lived behind him. All these houses had fences, so the walkway went almost the entire stretch of the street. I was hiding in this narrow walkway thinking that none of my friends would think to look behind the fences. And while I was leaning against one of the wooden beams, I heard footsteps on the thick grass. Since nobody mowed back there, the grass was pretty wild, and I looked down the path and saw someone walking in my direction, but it was just dark enough outside that I couldn't tell for sure who it was. When they got closer, I clearly saw who it was. It was the guy from the gray car, and he was approaching me with this big smile on his face, and in a voice a little louder than a whisper, he said,
"Hey, bud, how about that basketball? You guys don't seem to be using it now."
I kept saying sorry that I didn't have one, and I continued stepping in the opposite direction. I could hear him breathing and moving faster toward me the more I moved away. And if you're wondering why I wasn't screaming and yelling for help, the answer now is because I was stupid, I guess. I was for sure scared, and I knew that this was bad, but for some reason I remember being scared that if I yelled, it would somehow make things worse. I don't know why. This was just my logic in the moment. I started to move faster down the narrow walkway, and I could hear him moving even faster than before. I don't know exactly how close he was, but I could hear his breathing, and it felt like he was right on top of me. And then I heard a loud voice yell, "Hey you, what are you doing? You know that kid?" I just kept running. I heard the guy chasing me say something under his breath, and then he jumped over one of the fences. I ran as fast as I could and shouted for all my friends to meet me back in front of the house. The neighbor emerged from the narrow path and knocked on the door of my friend. He talked to his mom for a little bit, and then she made us stay inside for the rest of the night. I was happy, but some of my friends were upset. And nothing more happened that night, and I never saw that guy or that car again. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized how scary and horrible this could have been. It was scary then, but it didn't traumatize me. I just think as a child I didn't understand the severity of the situation. Parents out there, just please watch your children. There truly are monsters hiding everywhere.
I was in my office when I heard of my Uncle Bruno's death, which made me feel devastated. While growing up back in Ohio, Uncle Bruno was the only person I was close with among my other relatives. But after getting into college, I moved to Texas and was only able to make my visits occasionally. After getting off work, I decided to go directly to Ohio from my office. So I took out my car from the driveway and started driving towards my hometown. I called my mom, letting her know that I was coming and I was on my way. She asked me to pick up a suit on my way because they were going to arrange the funeral the next morning. While I was driving, I started reminiscing my past with Uncle Bruno. How he used to play hide and seek with me, how he taught me how to play baseball, and how he used to sneak up gifts for me from my mom's eyes. Remembering all those sweet moments made my eyes wet with tears, and I could not stop them from flowing down. As I was lost in these memories while driving, I noticed a girl showing her thumb from a distance trying to hitchhike. I thought about what a girl was doing in such a remote, unsafe area, and at this time at night on top of that. So I decided to give her a ride and stop the car. She asked me where I was going, and I told her that I was headed to Ohio. She did not disclose her destination. Instead, she said that it was right before Ohio, and she would tell me where to drop her off, which I understood. Being a girl and hitchhiking on a stranger's car could get pretty dangerous. But I wasn't the kind of guy who would ever do anything to a girl. I asked her name, but she kept quiet. So I understood that she didn't want to talk and decided to quietly drive to our destination. You know, it's strange that if you're driving alone silently, you don't notice it, but if there's someone in your car while the ride and there's silence, you suddenly become pretty aware of it. I was driving at a safe speed when I noticed the gas station that was there, and she spoke only to ask me to make us stop because she needed to go to the bathroom. I stopped the car and parked it near the gas station. She got off and went to the bathroom. It had been over 15 minutes since she went to the bathroom, and I was waiting for her. Still, I had no choice. I continued waiting. Another 10 minutes passed and she still had not returned from the bathroom. I thought about leaving her for once, but then I looked around the area and it did not seem safe, even for a man, let alone a girl here. That was when she returned and apologized to me, saying that the bathroom door got stuck when she was trying to exit, and she struggled to open it since it was hard for her. I told her it was okay, and that if she needed help, she could have called for me, but again she kept quiet. So I started the car and drove towards the destination. It was a long drive till we reached Ohio, so I told her to take a shut-eye if she felt tired, but she did not, and continued to stay awake while the ride was going on. I understood she might be worried about me taking advantage of her, but I had no such intention, and being a stranger, there was no way I could have convinced her about that. As I was continuously driving for hours without taking a rest, I started to feel a bit tired and sleepy, and thank God I'd already brought some energy drinks when I was leaving the town. So I took them out and started drinking them. The girl turned her head towards me and started staring. "Oh, this? It's an energy drink." I was feeling sleepy and so I took it out. "Do you want one? I have another one with me." I asked her and she shook her head no and turned her head to the road and continued looking out there for the rest of the ride. As we were about to get to the border of Ohio around 4 in the morning, she asked me to stop the car near a store and told me that I could go. I asked her if it was safe for her to stop here, and she told me that she lived nearby and someone was coming to pick her up soon. After wishing her goodbye, I drove to my place and reached there about half an hour or so. When Mom asked me if I packed the suit or not, I told her that I forgot, and in response, she said that she already knew and told me that she had asked someone to buy one for me already. I went to Uncle Bruno's room. Everything looked the same as I left. Every corner of the room, the house, everything was filled with memories of him. I asked Mom if Cousin Frank was coming, and she told me that he would reach by evening. Frank was Uncle Bruno's son, but he was very selfish and greedy. He was always only after Uncle Bruno's property, which Uncle Bruno denied ever giving him. But I guess he was still his son, and may have even loved his father. The same evening, instead of Frank, a call from the hospital came informing us that Frank was met by an accident and was admitted to the hospital, and that was on the outskirts of this town. I went there to check on his condition, and he was seriously injured, specifically his hands, which were broken in a manner as if someone intentionally did that to him. When he regained his consciousness, he started shouting that the girl with the lion tattoo did that to him. It was weird that the girl that I gave a ride to also had a pretty visible lion tattoo on her neck. He was admitted to the hospital for a few days. Mom told me to go back to work and that she would take care of everything. While I was going back, I did not see the girl, even though I kept thinking about her. Only because I felt it to be a weird coincidence that my perverted cousin would mention a girl with a similar feature as her. One day during work, I heard two of my colleagues talk about a hitchhiker on the highway road where I met her. The description they said also matched the girl. According to them, the girl hitchhikes, and if the person giving her a ride tries to take advantage of her or anything, she punishes them in a way that they never forget.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
I can't say Andre was a particularly weird dude. I didn't know him well, but every time we did speak, he came across as completely normal. He was a pretty quiet guy, not very talkative, but then again, I've never been either. His personal interactions with others, at least the ones I witnessed, appeared totally above board. And as far as I'm aware, he did okay in classes and never had any more trouble with his teachers than anyone else. What I'm saying is nobody I hung out with had any concerns about his sanity. The events of the coming years, which should show how horrible and terrible judge of character I had, then maybe those close to him knew the true face behind the mask. As for me, when the facts of this case came out, I was shocked that it only got worse from there. As often happens, life moved on after high school as did Di, and Andre became a small part of my childhood. That one morning as I flipped through my newspaper, the face from my past was staring back at me, and when I read in the article adjoined, it meant my blood run cold. Since I'm not a professional writer, I thought I used the account the Texas Tribune's managing editor Brandy Grimson used in a feature she wrote for Texas Monthly. She states by 2004, Andre was 21 years old, deeply mentally ill, and receiving no treatment. On the bright, clear morning of March 27th, a change up the stairs to the third-floor apartment where Laura, his estranged wife, lived, and kicked in the door. Her boyfriend had already left for work. Andre was holding 3 knives, one of each of his intended victims. He first encountered Laura, who ran toward him screaming now. Andre plunged a knife into her chest. He then reached in and pulled out what he believed was her heart. He'd in fact extracted part of her lung. Next, he headed for the children's room, where Andre Jr. and 1-year-old Leah were sleeping. Andre held down his 4-year-old son and stabbed him before moving on to Leah. He carved out each of the children's hearts. Finally, Andre jammed a knife into his own chest 3 times and laid down beside Laura on the living room floor, expecting to die. Confounded when he didn't, he slipped the organs he had removed into his pocket and walked more than 5 miles home. A few hours later, he went to the Sherman Police Department where he confessed to the murders and asked if he would be forgiven. I thought it was what God wanted me to do. He later told investigators after undergoing emergency surgery to repair his life-threatening stab wounds. Andre was moved to the Grayson County Jail, where his behavior became more and more psychotic. He gestured wildly and announced that he was going to save the world. He claimed to be the 13th warrior of the dollar bill and said that Laura and the children weren't dead, but that their hearts had been freed from evil. Horrified doesn't begin to describe my feelings upon reading this. He had always been hiding the monster inside him, or as often happens, had the specter of schizophrenia gradually take hold of him as he entered into his early 20s. It's an answer I doubt I'll ever get. Almost everything written on the case focuses on the monstrosity of the crimes rather than its causes. As shocking as this all was, the case was destined to only become more bizarre. I figured once the trial eventually came around, Andre would eventually be found guilty and given multiple life sentences or the death penalty. No matter the result, he would do just as he had before and slip to the back of my mind, perhaps only to be thought of on very rare occasions. It appears, however, he wasn't quite ready to be forgotten. Just 6 days after taking the lives of his family, my old school acquaintance gouged out his right eye. It was claimed he did so because of a Bible passage he'd read. Even after all this odd behavior, he was deemed fit to stand trial for capital murder. Just as I'd imagined when the time came, he was found guilty for all 3 murders and sentenced to death. The people for Texas had spoken, and the time had come for Andre to move off to his new home on death row. As before, I foolishly believed his and my stories had diverged for the last time, and nothing more could happen. Andre had one more card up his sleeve to play, however, and one more I left to black out. Once again, the story said he blinded himself because of the very same Bible verse. However, this time, he upped the ante on 2 counts. Rather than stabbing out the offending eye, he yanked it out from the socket. The second part was far more gruesome. When the guard had discovered him in his cell covered in blood at the location of said owl, the answer was simple. He didn't it. Despite what he'd printed in all of the sensationalist newspaper articles, the true reason for blinding himself seems to be an attempt to force the state of Texas to give him the psychiatric care he'd been asking for since his arrest. The appears he'd gotten as wish, but as it stands now, his death sentence remains standing. The way things are currently, Andre is being held in a state psychiatric facility, awaiting his day with the executioner. That's the extent of any information I've been able to come across. As recently as 2013, a Texas Court of Criminal Appeal judge found the defendant clearly crazy, but also sane under Texas law. While I'm not here to discuss the finer points of whether the death penalty is a good or bad thing, that's a far deeper length, and I'm prepared to wait until I think we could all agree the man has some problems. I've included only the most important facts in my retelling, but you will have no problem finding more through a simple internet search if you're so inclined. However, I do warn you, the remaining details are not for the faint of heart. For some readers, the outright gruesome nature may prove to be too much. You've been warned.
No movie will ever compare to the hell that I've gone through the last year. The ordeal seems like it's been one long waking nightmare. It all began normally enough. I just recently got out of a long-term relationship and wasn't looking for anything serious. I figured that I'd give Tinder a shot. It didn't take long for me to get a few matches. I chose the hottest one and we agreed to meet a week later. The date went so well that we decided to do it again, and this became a regular thing until the 4th date. It was beginning to look as if it may grow into something more in spite of my original intentions. As the 4th date wrapped up, I invited her back to my place for a drink. She agreed, and things soon got hot and heavy, as they say. We were mere seconds away from taking things all the way when she broke down. I was confused. I'm not an aggressive partner, and her behavior up to that point had been very receptive. I asked what was wrong, and she said that she had been assaulted by a previous boyfriend. It had been several years since she thought that she had moved past it. I felt bad for her, yet still kind of frustrated, and she got up and dressed quickly. I'll admit it was, like I said, frustrating, but there was little I could do, and I understood where she was coming from. I called her an Uber and she left me with a difficult decision to make. After a long, sleepless night, I decided to just kind of end things there. Some of you reading this may call me cruel, but I couldn't really see another option. Things appeared to just be at an impasse, you know? I wasn't going to wait around until she determined that she was ready, and I sure wasn't going to pressure her into anything, obviously. I told myself that it was for the best. I'd never wanted to jump right into another relationship so quickly. That wouldn't benefit either of us, and I broke things off as kindly as I could. That night never came up. I stressed how I'd felt I'd rushed into things too quickly, and naturally she was a bit upset, but gave no indication of actually being angry. I wished her a happy future and just bid her a goodbye. And normally, that's where it would have ended. I took a month off from dating and Tinder and all that, and when I came back, I matched with a beautiful graduate student just looking to have a good time. This is more of what I was looking for. We met for drinks and hit it off. I went home happy with a spring in my step and a gleam in my eyes, they say. And maybe 2 days passed when I got a call from a neighbor. He informed me that there were leaflets posted all around our neighborhood, calling me an attempted predator. I thought this was his idea of some sick joke, and definitely not a good one. I laughed, but he assured me that this wasn't a laughing matter. I demanded proof, and a few minutes later he came to my door with a bright yellow piece of paper, and it claimed the following. On the night of Friday, November 19th, 2021, I was invited on a dinner date with Mr. My Name. After being plied with many glasses of wine, I was pressured into joining him at his home. Although I was clearly unable to consent, Mr. My Name attempted to coax me into his bed. When I refused his advances, he became enraged and threw me onto the street in the middle of the night. Please make sure all your female friends are made aware of the danger they may face by dating this manipulative monster. I can't begin to describe the anger that I felt in that moment. It was made worse when the neighbor asked me if it was true. Of course it wasn't, but when someone asks that type of question, it's a good indication that they believe it. Rather than strangle him, I did my best to assure him it was not. And his reception was less than convincing, but I had more pressing problems at that second. I had to get all those flyers, or whatever you call them, before any more impressionable idiots saw them. I spent most of the day pulling them from light poles and bulletin boards all over town. I'm still not sure if I got them all, and I counted over 200 when all was said and done. Then, out of nowhere, I discovered that I had been banned from Tinder after someone filed a complaint against me. My life felt like it was spiraling out of control, and I was desperate to stop it any way I could. What came next was probably the biggest mistake I'd made during this entire ordeal. I worked myself into such a muddle I did the one thing I shouldn't have. I contacted her via text message to confront her. She promised to retract her claims if I agreed to meet her face to face, and I took the bait like a sucker and drove to her house. We sat down at her kitchen table where she explained how hurt she felt. I wasn't interested in hearing any of it, but I was willing to suffer to save my good name. While she did so, she kept a glass of wine close at hand. She had clearly been drinking even before I arrived. After an hour, everything appeared to be handled. As I prepared to leave, she began coming on to me, and I mean in a very obvious manner, and I almost gave in, but then I remembered our previous problem and I shut her down. She was not pleased. She hissed and walked off toward the kitchen. I figured that she was getting some more wine, and it seemed like a great time to sneak away. I was putting on my jacket when a crash came from the kitchen. I hurried in to see what the matter was and was met by a shrill screeching. She rushed towards me with the stem of a broken wine glass and stabbed me with it. She retracted the jagged stem from the wound and snarled like some freaking animal. I was in shock, and I froze for a brief moment, unsure of how to react. Then she lunged at me again, just missing, and I took off. She pursued me out to my car and pounded on it as I sped off, and I just drove straight to the hospital, calling 911 as I drove. I informed the dispatcher which hospital I could be found at if the police needed to speak to me, and sure enough, An officer arrived as I was being treated for my injury. Luckily for me, she hadn't hit any major arteries or organs or anything like that, and the cop let me know that my assailant had been arrested, but what came next was a complete surprise. I was shocked to learn that she had a previous conviction for stalking and assault, and I surmised that it was a similar situation. Monday came around, and despite what I had hoped, my attacker was given bail. She paid and was out in time for dinner. I was furious and gave the assistant DA a piece of my mind, and while I waited for the trial day to arrive, I remained in a constant state of fear. I could swear that I saw her once or twice over that period, but I was in such a frazzled state that it was possibly my imagination. She became all I thought about. My work suffered. Even in my dreams, she often took center stage. She refused several plea deals and insisted the jury would acquit her. I know it was all a stall tactic, and she was assembling all the elements that she would need to what I thought would be to disappear. And the first rumblings began during jury selection. She had not been present for the procedure. Although she wasn't required to be, it didn't bode well. Then when the trial began in earnest, her lawyer was finally forced to admit that he had lost contact with his client several weeks prior. Now today is October 28th as I write this, and she's been missing almost 2 months. I sit around wondering what my future may hold. Hopefully she's done the wise thing and is currently laying low halfway around the world, or something. On the surface, that appears to be the case. Yet for some reason, I'm not totally convinced. My former love interest is a highly successful and intelligent woman. It's largely what drew her to me from the beginning. I have a creeping suspicion that she may be focusing her vast resources into getting back at me. Whatever form that may take, I'm not really sure. Naturally, I fear she'll go to the conventional route and just end my life, likely by her own hand, maybe another stabbing. However, she is more than capable to go even further and extend my suffering indefinitely. And this is why I'm going to all the trouble to post my side of the story. I'm well aware I probably come off as a jerk in some circumstances, but I don't care. I just want a record of the truth to be available publicly should I disappear. My lawyer also has a copy in case I'm no longer around to testify on my own behalf. It's doubtless that law enforcement will eventually catch up with her at some point. I'm concerned it will be too late for me, though. So if you learn of the death or a disappearance of some unknown New York State attorney through the media, please remember what you read here.